All those who are holding tickets outside will get in as fast as they can. I'm speaking not to you, ladies and gentlemen, but I'm speaking to the crowd on the outside, who seem to be standing rather reluctant to come in, and we're going to start this very soon.
Welcome back to Worthy. My name is John.
And I'm Ben.
And today we're going to review all of 2022 by breaking down our favorite films of the year, and specifically our top 10 best films of 2022. Obviously, this is completely subjective. Ben and I have not compiled one list, but we each have our own. That way we can discuss and talk about more films than just 10. But before we jump into our list and some of our other smaller categories here, I wanted to jump in and talk a little bit about people's worst films of the year. I think it's pretty often that you see, especially on like YouTube, film commentary, critics, whatever you want to call them, I think it's pretty often that you see a lot of people post a top 10 worst films of the year. And a lot of the times that kind of criticism, that negativity is highly viewed. In fact, it's sometimes more watched than some of the top 10 films of 2022. And I guarantee that if we were to do a worst film list of 2022, it'd probably be more watched than the top 10 films of the year. I think people just enjoy negativity when it comes to their content. It's more engaging. It's more, it's a hot topic. People want to hear what people hate instead of what people love more. I think that's just common in our entertainment. But I wanted to talk about it just because I used to watch those. I used to be a very big fan, not a big fan of just worst films, just curious what people don't like in a year. But I've come to the point after, especially making short films in college and moving forward, it's definitely become harder for me personally to just kind of look down upon a film and just call it purely bad, especially when, as we both know, and as we've kind of talked about some of these movies, it takes like a village and a half to make a movie. And obviously it's not someone's intention to spend 3 to 6 months, sometimes even longer, and make something that's bad. And then just to simply watch that product in such a short amount of time and then just deem it as bad and one of the worst movies of the year, I just think it's a little ridiculous. I don't really think it does anything good for not only film as a medium, but really just in general. All it does is just stir up negativity and stir up people hating things all over again. So I wanted to first ask you, Ben, like, why do you think people love these worst lists, maybe sometimes even more than the top 10? And how do you feel about them? Do you feel the same way? Do you think that we don't need these in the world of film criticism and film talk?
My feeling about people and their love for like bad movies has, and like we've been around it because I've talked about it before on the podcast. Like we have friends who just really love like schlocky movies, just like poorly made products, and how I just can't sit there and enjoy it. So that's one part. And then when it comes to like listing stuff, it feels mean in its own way. Like, why would we, like, as you said, like, why are we showing someone else's art? Why would we drag it, so much when maybe it's just you don't like it, and that's a very personal thing. So then when it comes to making the actual list and like people reading it, that's a personal thing. And again, like there are a lot of people who just love bad movies and watching them and ranking them, but it's just not for me. So it's definitely not an area that I enter because I just don't feel comfortable with it. It's not really like, if I don't like a movie, if I think a movie is bad, I just think it's bad, and I I'll give it my review and say why I don't like it, but I'm not gonna want it to be like so publicly known. I would rather people know what I did like for the year, like what movies felt good to me, that I enjoyed seeing, that I want other people to go see. So when it comes to worst films, I'm very like, that's not for me to like entertain, to want to be a part of, and actively do. So I just stay away from the worst films and like being a part of like what I want to talk about.
Sure. Yeah, it's definitely very negative. And I think the other side of it would be like, well, if I haven't watched a lot of movies and I want to know like what movies I should avoid, I think that's like maybe the only credible argument you could have with something like that, where it's like, okay, if you like this person, you kind of agree with their opinion, they're saying that these movies were their least favorite, then maybe you could avoid them moving forward. But at the same time, that kind of you could just do that with a review. If you want to watch a movie, you could just look up reviews, seeing a collective of different people's opinions and say, yeah, maybe I shouldn't watch that because multiple people feel that way, and maybe I will too. So I think there's definitely some room there for maybe an argument in terms of why it's needed, why they're more popular. I just think it comes down to, people like negativity more than they do positivity. I think it's just more entertaining to kind of see that and talk about that. So I think it's easy to do that. And later on in our list here, we do have some other categories, and we do have a disappointing film category, which is just one film. But to me, just saying a film is disappointing is a lot different than just saying it's deeming one thing as being the worst movie or worst kind of piece of art in that year. So all in that, really just to say, do we really need it? Maybe someone listens to it and it changes their mind on this top 10 worst kind of thing. And it doesn't just apply to film. It applies to like every medium that we do this with. We do it with music, we do it with books, we do it with everything when it comes to ranking things in an order like this. It's so easy to just say, well, what's the worst right away? And I think we should always focus more on the positive things. I think there's a lot of people that probably Morbius was their favorite movie of 2022.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Yeah, Morbius is a lot of people's number one worst movie of the year. And really, if you think that's the worst movie of the year, you need to watch more movies, okay? There's definitely a lot worse that came out this year. But anyway...
Are you sure about that?
But anyway, let's not dive too deep into the bad, and let's talk about the good, and that is the top 10 films of 2022. Jumping on the very top, I want to just mention some films that we haven't seen. For me personally, I haven't seen Living and All Quiet on the Western Front, the new remake on Netflix, and I haven't seen Woman Talking. And Ben, what are some of the films that you haven't seen yet from 2022?
Yeah, so I haven't seen Living yet either, but tomorrow, after the time of this recording, I actually found a viewing, and I'm going to go see it. So... yeah, maybe too little too late. And then I haven't seen Broker yet, and I'm trying to see a viewing of that probably for the next week or two. It seems like some theaters are playing it where I am. I have seen All Quiet on the Western Front and Women Talking. So definitely would encourage John to go see them, especially All Quiet on the Western Front, just because based on a Best Picture winner, I think I'm not going to say it's a totally different take, but it's definitely more modern, different approach to than what we talked about from the third episode of the series. So a lot of movies that didn't make the list. And I'm sure we have some honorable mentions. John, you want to give some of your honorable mentions for 2022?
Yeah, absolutely. It was a really hard year to kind of narrow it down. And there's just some films that I didn't really get to make my top 10 list, and I wanted to just talk about them a little bit. Films like Spielberg's The Fabelmans I thought was really wonderful and really charming. I don't really want to go into the reasons why they didn't make the top 10 because I think we could be here all night if I did. Mm-hmm. But these are all films that I straight up enjoyed and wish they could be on the top 10. So The Fabelmans, Tar, I thought was really great. That Cate Blanchett performance was really wonderful. That to me almost feels like a movie. If I were to rewatch it, I may even get more out of it. It feels like a very complex kind of look into someone. And it's funny that I was so against watching this movie because I think I'm just so over biopics, and it's so funny because this movie isn't even a biopic. It's like a spoof on biopics almost, and this inside joke on the way people make biopics and how it tries to subvert that expectation. And if someone just told me that this wasn't based on a real composer, I would have seen this immediately. But the fact that I'm I don't want to see a biopic, especially a biopic about a composer. I couldn't give two shits about that. Yeah. And now I wish I had seen it in theaters. So you never know.
Yeah. Well, it was great to see in theaters. And yeah, it's definitely about the praising of somebody and, here are the accolades, but here's the person type of thing. So
yeah. And that contrast between the two of it.
Absolutely.
The other films, Netflix, The Good Nurse, I thought was really great in terms of just telling this true life story in a very subtle and not over-exaggerated dramatic fashion. I thought it was really, really, really great performances from Jessica Chastain and Eddie Redmayne. Really, really great performances there. Glass Onion, I wish I could have gotten to fit that on my top 10. I think it goes a little too out there for me, a little too schlocky. Avatar: The Way of Water. I mean, what an amazing experience. I would say one of the best film going experiences I've had throughout the year. Really wonderful. Films like Triangle of Sadness I thought was really great and really great screenplay. A24's After Sun was really sweet. Also another film that I think might grow on me the more I see it. Elvis as well. Like, what a Baz Luhrmann nonstop thrill ride that was. I really enjoyed Hulu's Prey on the Hulu channel. It's so annoying that film didn't come to theaters because it was visually amazing, and it's such a shame that we didn't get to see that on a big screen. Of course, RRR from India. What a crazy movie that kind of like took over this year. Probably the most talked about foreign film. What a great time. Such a funny time to watch that, and such a great movie to throw on with friends while you drink. Ben, let me hear some of your honorable mentions of 2022.
Yeah, so I also had Avatar: The Way of Water on there. Great, movie watching experience. It's a huge spectacle, so definitely worthy enough to be towards the top of my list. Bodies, Bodies, Bodies. I love that. Horror. Like, definitely had a cool new take or twist at the end, so I was very much into that. I love Tar, so that was another honorable mention for me. The the Al Yankovic story was awesome. And again, like how you said with Prey, like this movie was only on the Roku channel. And I don't know if that was like another joke in and of itself, but this movie would have killed, I think, at the movies. I think a lot of people would have gone to go see it. I don't know how big it could have done the box office, but I think it would have done way better than people assumed. Daniel Radcliffe is great, and it's really funny. And it teeters on that edge of like bad movies. So kind of like what I talked before, how it's not for me. Like some people may find this to be a bad movie, but I think it does it teeters on the edge of like, yes, we know we're doing this like schlocky thing, but then they tie in a really great joke into it, like scene by scene. And it's like, oh, that's hilarious. That like, I'm so glad like I stuck through that. Another one, not necessarily like a movie, that I would like put in my top 10, but just a movie that I would mention, because it's so popular is Black Panther: Wakanda Forever. Great movie about grief. Angela Bassett's really phenomenal in her role in the film, and it was, for what they had to deal with, like that's definitely worth mentioning, because I can't imagine having to rewrite a whole movie after my lead character in this huge blockbuster movie dies. So just tremendous like work by Ryan Coogler. And then a movie that I teetered on the edge of being my number 10 or not was The Whale. I really liked it. There's a lot of criticism about that movie that I don't think is very fair to the movie, and would love to talk about it if others feel differently. But yeah, The Whale was a movie that teetered on the edge, but it would be like number 11 for me on the top movie list of the year.
Those are all great picks. And before we jump into the top 10 of 2022, I had some fun little extra categories I added here just to prime us till we get to our top 10.
All right.
So I wanted to know, what is the film of 2022 that made you laugh the most?
It was a movie I saw with you, John, Jackass Forever.
Hell yes. And that's also my pick as well. Man, I was crying in that movie.
So funny.
So funny. I mean, the scene alone with them locked in the room with all the lights turned off and not knowing what was in the room, if there was actually a snake in there or not, like truly
was that called
hilarious.
Like the Silence of the Lambs or something?
Yeah, something like that. Such a hilarious film, and it was just great to see all those guys back, and especially that they pushed it to the big screens and
Yep.
respected it like it's a full feature film. It's great. It's great. That I think we both have a lot of like history of being in middle school and high school and watching all the craziness that is Jackass and all the Steve-O spinoffs and everything that came from the kind of Jackass brand. I think it's kind of close to our hearts. So that was really great to go and see that together and just laugh our asses off. By far the most I laughed at a film all year.
I laughed really hard. I love the Jackass movies. So stupid and so fun. And I wouldn't say they're my heroes, but they were my teenage heroes.
Moving on, we're going to flip it. And instead of laughing, let's talking about the film that made you cry the most in 2022, Ben.
The Fabelmans made me cry the most. Just an emotional journey through Spielberg's eyes and some of his own personal life at being a Jewish person. I felt very connected to the movie. So like I welled up during some of those parts and just like how familiar some of the stuff they were doing felt. And then again, just like the amount of love that he had for filmmaking, like I was watching it in awe and I'm like, wow, this is really great. And then just seeing how the main character reacts and to their own movies, it made me feel like, wow, like I love being a part of like a community, like being so into cinema and film. So I didn't like bawl crying, but I was like tearing up for this. But a movie I did bawl cry is the movie you cried at the most. And John, what is that movie?
That is Clerks 3, which we've definitely talked about Kevin Smith on this podcast, maybe even the Clerks franchise. Clerks 3 is by far the most dramatic and upsetting and heartbreaking of them all, and I just didn't really expect it. And it almost hit me harder. I mean, I'm a really big fan of Kevin Smith. I've listened to tons of his hours, thousands of hours. I've probably listened to him speak more than anyone else in my entire life. And does that kind of, put maybe some heart-shaded glasses over my eyes? Maybe a little bit. I mean, it's part of my growing up. I remember like watching that early in high school. I think it may have been Mallrats first, and kind of just diving into his filmography. It's been really close to me my entire life, but I think the film hit me even harder because I just wasn't really vibing with the first 30 minutes maybe of the movie. If you don't know, Clerks is a movie about like a convenience store, and this is the third iteration where we have these characters coming back what is like 30 plus years later, I believe. And they're basically trying to retell the original Clerks, which is a person who just made an indie film with his friends. And it is a funny kind of jokey moments in the very beginning that kind of like show us how that process, it's very meta insider, but it's like, I've seen Kevin Smith do a lot of meta things. I've seen him do just make a lot of jokes about himself, about his previous films, even about Clerks. And it wasn't until like we really got to what the heart of the movie was about and the real like actual conflict of the film between our two leading characters that like really took me by surprise. And it went from being something that felt so just tired and just kind of like bored and turned it into something that like you may call it emotional manipulation, but man, is it some of the best emotional, manipulating that's happened to me all year. I bawled my eyes out in the last like 15 minutes of this movie. It's extremely dramatic, and you wouldn't expect it from this stupid comedy that started with like dick and fart jokes. You would never expect it, and I think that's kind of what made it hit even harder for me. All right, moving on. Let's do the best film surprise of 2022.
Yeah, so mine is Metal Lords, the movie from Netflix made by David Benioff and D.B. Weiss, the Game of Thrones guys. I thought this movie would be like all right, but then I watched the movie and I was like, this is really good. Like the storytelling, was very emotional. Like I felt connected to it, being someone who's a fan of metal and played bands in high school like that. It felt like so familiar. It's very much about teenagers and what they're going through. And then the actual music part of it, there's a really great sequence where they use War Pigs as like the track to do like all the edits with. And it's really well done. The shots are way better than what you would expect. And I love the ending of it. I love the ending jam song they do at the end. I just, how like in depth into the emotions they get for like a teenager, it felt like, it was just shocking that I was like so into it, and it felt right with the end product. So I don't know if you saw Metal Lords, but I would definitely recommend people check that out. It's a fun movie, and you wouldn't expect that.
I didn't. No, I definitely need to check that out. And it's even more funny because my film is also very musical and very much about music, and that is Intergalactic. And that is a film that not only has Kid Cudi as our lead star, it's also a film that has a score that's all by Kid Cudi, all original Kid Cudi songs, and he's the main character in this film. And it just took me so much by surprise. Not only is it kind of this weird hybrid of stop motion animation, it's this extremely touching love story. And it's a really simple, like, girl meets boy love story. And they take that simple formula and they integrate it with such amazing animation. It's bright, it's colorful. And I love Kid Cudi. I love his music, and he's really growing into an actually pretty great actor. So that really took me by surprise, not only because he was a great performer in it. It's just a really beautiful movie. It's really touching. It's sweet. If you're looking for a nice little, like, hour and a half animated movie that's just a cute little love story about two characters in New York, it's so sweet. And honestly, I think it does some of the best, like, visualization of New York City itself. Definitely in this year. It's the best, like, depiction of New York in 2022, without a doubt. All right, moving on. And I know we talked about not shitting on movies, not, ripping them apart. But I think we have to acknowledge just what our biggest film disappointment of 2022 was.
Yeah, mine was Lightyear. I was really excited for this. I love the Toy Story franchise. Everyone I know is so confused by the whole, like, concept of it, which it's really not that hard to understand that this is the movie that Andy saw. Anyways, I just was disappointed with what the movie ended up being, and it just, the animation was cool, but it didn't feel like a full story to me. I feel like there could have been more. It felt very, like, I was expecting more. This felt like way too obvious at some points. Like, they really wanted to use, like, Zurg, like, because the toy in Toy Story 2, you're made to believe that Zurg is his father, but not in this movie. It's literally him, and it's a weird thing. It's a weird concept. I wasn't a huge fan of it. So I was very disappointed that I didn't come out walking out of Lightyear, like, more in love and more excited about it.
Yeah, I remember talking to you about that, and we both had such different reactions because both my girlfriend and I, like, loved that movie. Like, the animation alone, I think, is unreal. Like, it's so photorealistic at times that it's just stunning. And I've been a huge Toy Story fan myself as well, but I both loved, Woody and Buzz Lightyear. And I always dreamed, growing up watching the animated Buzz Lightyear cartoons that, like, my God, it would be so cool to see this, like, really done as, like, a full-fledged film. And we got a little bit of a taste of that. I get if, like, people are not, not happy with the kind of, like, sci-fi interstellar kind of, like, twist that happens in that film. But, I love good sci-fi. And while the film does steal from a lot of other famous, like, sci-fi plot lines and films, I still had a great time. I got to be honest. And I love the idea of just it being the film that inspired the toy. And, if people don't want to see the real Tim Allen Buzz Lightyear, or they want to see that only, I get it. It's what you're used to. It's what you want to see. So whatever. But, there is a franchise that I do love.
Yeah.
And there's a franchise that really disappointed me this year. And it disappointed me so bad that I literally didn't even have high hopes for it. I had, like, the lowest low expectations for this movie, and it still somehow disappointed me. And that is Jurassic World Dominion. And oh my God, I've ranted about this before. I think it might have been our summer box office episode, but I won't go too into it. If you really want to hear my rant about my experience watching Jurassic World, which may have affected my opinion of the film even more, go check out our summer box office wrap up from this past year. But Jurassic World was such a huge disappointment. And in summary, you're going to bring this original OG cast back. You're going to just completely discredit them by not giving them anything to do other than repeating the same beats that we've already seen them do. And you're not even going to make a film really about the dinosaurs taking over. In fact, this movie was so disappointing because the marketing just straight up lied to the audience, implying that this would be some globe-trotting huge adventure of them trying to, like, control the world again from dinosaurs. No, it's just a bunch of dinosaurs stuck inside another park. No, all our heroes just get stuck inside the park again. It's like, God, it hurt. It really hurt. Well, on that note, let's talk about some of the best, non-2022 film. So I like to throw this in because obviously Ben and I, we do the podcast. We talk about the year in film that we're in for the podcast, Worthy, but we also like to watch modern films But, sometimes we try to squeeze in those other films, as many as we can throughout the year. So, Ben, tell me one, maybe multiple of your non-2022 films.
Yeah, so you put in parentheses next to this, no Best Picture winners, which I was like, God damn it. Because that would have made it so much easier. And then I thought, okay, let me challenge myself a little bit, because a lot of the movies that I do end up watching on my own are related to the podcast, which are other movies from the year of the film we're reviewing. And I was like, I shouldn't do one of those. That feels, because I've talked about them before. But I felt like because we're a movie podcast, and I felt like because it's so relevant, at least it still is relevant to me, is what the Sight and Sound poll was this year and what the top film was, the consensus top film based on the 2022 Sight and Sound poll. There was no longer Citizen Kane, but jumping up, I think it was the 34th spot from the 2012 edition, was Jean Dielman, 23 Commerce Quay, 1080 Brussels. I probably butchered that entire thing, but it's a French film coming out in 1975. It was voted as this #1 movie, so I had a chance to go see it in a theater with one of our friends, and I loved it. I actually didn't even know what to expect with it, besides that a lot of people say this is a great movie. And it's not your typical, there's not that much, it's not a dialogue heavy film. It's a 3.5 hour movie, and there's maybe 15 pages of dialogue. So there's a lot of silence in this movie, a lot of static shots. But as you're watching it and as you're getting invested within the film, you start to be like, wow, this is actually, and when you compare it to a movie like Avatar, which, seeing that in a theater this year is two totally different ends of the spectrum of what a 3-hour movie can be. But I felt like the story in Jean Dielman was way more engaging and made more sense. With Avatar, where I thought I liked Avatar. I love the visuals. Some of the story I just didn't love as much, and that's kind of my issue with the first Avatar movie, is the story was never really the strong point for me. But John Dielman, just a very under the radar, all of a sudden it just gets good, and you're like, I did not expect that, and I'm happy I watched that movie. So it's definitely not for everybody, but for those who are into film, who will want to sit through a 3.5 hour French film with really no dialogue, a lot of static shots, a lot of repetitive things, this is for you.
That is a great choice.
Yeah. I felt like I had to bring it up, because of our platform of having Worthy, and I feel like that if people critics, directors want to say this movie is worth seeing, it is worth putting up there as these are important movies to watch, and not saying that lists wholly matters. Citizen Kane, it's a good movie, and I can understand why people would love it so much, but I feel like it got passed over very quickly once others started using the techniques that Orson Welles did, which was so innovative for the time, that it got passed very quickly, but people just kept wanting to hold on to it. Whereas this is okay, maybe this might spark more debate, maybe this might spark more ideas, and we can have more art house films, but maybe you can appreciate some of the Hollywood films that came after Citizen Kane and be wow, these are actually really great movies, and we combine it, which is what Sight and Sound did. And it's a list I wrote down on my phone that are movies I want to watch. I was wow, these seem really great movies from across the entire spectrum of cinema in the entire world. I'm going to enjoy myself watching this. So that's kind of the beauty of diving deep and going out of the Hollywood spectrum of films.
Yeah, that's a great choice, and definitely I don't expand beyond the Hollywood kind of bubble that we live in. I think it's pretty easy to be trapped in, and especially doing Worthy, where majority of the films that win Best Pictures are made in Hollywood and kind of are Hollywood films. So I think it's hard to escape that, but it's great that you got out to go see that. And I'm almost jealous that you got to see that. It's one of those films where people brag about yeah, I've seen that. I've seen that 3-hour long talky film with long takes. And I'm oh, you son of a bitch. You bragging now.
It's one of the perks of living in an East Coast city.
Well, yeah, really, just one of the major cities you get to see amazing films like that. My favorite non-2022 film of the year is actually a Steven Spielberg film, all the way back from 1974, and that's the Sugarland Express. So I'd never seen this. It's actually Spielberg's first theatrical film. He made I think about 3 TV films before that, and this is his first theatrical film, and man, it is engrossing. It's basically a film that follows a couple that is escaping. Well, she's helping the husband escape, basically, from a prison, and then they're driving across Texas, basically, in order to get to foster care to get their child. So it's kind of like a road trip film. It's like a runaway film. It's got that Thelma and Louise vibe to it. But it is so engrossing. It almost feels like a movie like Tar, where it's like, wow, this feels like it's based on a true story. Like, it feels like we're honoring characters that exist and we have like real evidence of them. But no, this is just an insanely well-written film that it just feels lived in and real. And you really like fall in love with these characters, even though they're kind of the worst. I mean, you're watching these 2 criminals travel and escape from the police, and they're not listening to anyone but themselves, and they become like almost famous icons throughout America. I think it does a really good job of like displaying what fame even means, what like being infamous means in America, and the way women that are famous are treated differently than men that are famous. So it has a lot really going for it. And I was just like amazed that this is one of his earliest films. It screams someone who knows what they're doing behind the camera with amazing blocking. And who would expect that from someone like Spielberg? Alrighty, wrapping up our side categories here, I wanted to talk about something that we almost never talk about, which is television. And we don't have any bias against television. Ben and I both watch a lot of great TV. So, Ben, what is your favorite television show of 2022?
Yeah, so I thought about this, and like a few documentaries came up, but then I really enjoyed this one. It was Winning Time: The Rise of the Lakers Dynasty. I love basketball. I love basketball documentaries. I feel like basketball's a great sport to put into a documentary form. They hype it up. There's a lot of like interesting storylines, a lot of great characters, and that's what you get in this movie. It's very fabricated. It's not meant to be, I think, taken so literally. I mean, some of the things I think did happen, or at least it's inspired by different events, and obviously what did happen with the 1980s Lakers and the dynasty they had. And it just was like really unexpected how good it was, and then the changing of like shot formats to use like actual tape, to using film, to using high depth cinema cameras. Like it was really interesting with how they edited it and shot the show. And John C. Reilly as Jerry Buss, like he was just so charismatic and perfect for the role. So definitely Winning Time was my favorite show of the year. What about you though?
I went for a Vince Gilligan show, and it's not Breaking Bad. It's the prequel show, Better Call Saul, which ended with its 6th season this year. And wow, what a great show. I mean, it goes without a doubt that you're expecting such high quality from someone like Gillian, who made Breaking Bad, which is, I think hands down, most people would agree that it's one of the best television shows of all time. And I think Better Call Saul is so good in it. It almost rivals how great that show is. And they're both very different. Better Call Saul is kind of leaning more into comedy, since we're seeing, the classic Jimmy character who's just can never keep things straight. He always has to break the law. And that obviously boils up for him. And the show does such an interesting way of providing us more knowledge from what happens after Breaking Bad, while also giving us this prequel story of how our character even got into the show and the time frame of Breaking Bad. But really, I just was struck by how you end the show, and the way they ended the show was just so, not only just both heartbreaking, but it was also so like perfect for these characters. And at the end of the day, Better Call Saul is almost a love story, and it's a love story about 2 characters that just, they're not good for each other. And as much as they love each other for all the ways that you love your partner, they just know that they create something together that is not healthy. And that's just not something you really like ever hear talk about in anything, really. Like, it's something that like you probably would only hear if you go to couples therapy. Like, it's this weird plot device that they use to tell us this troubled love story, and it's like not at all what you would expect this show to be about. But man, everything is great, obviously, with it being Vince Gilligan and all of his great producers behind him. I mean, talk about amazing cinematography, amazing blocking. It's just some of the best made television without a doubt. And I can't wait to see what Vince Gilligan does next. It's a shame that Better Call Saul is ending, but I think and I'm like just excited to see where Gillian goes from here and where Bob Odenkirk can continue and grow in his career. So I thought that'd be a great way to end our side little topics here. And now it's time to jump into our top 10 films of 2022. Hit me first, Ben, with your number 10.
Well, listen here, kids. Elvis is my number 10 movie of 2022. Baz Luhrmann, just Baz Luhrmann over the entire movie. Austin Butler is phenomenal as Elvis. Like, he truly is great in that role. And there's been a lot of biopics recently of male singers, Elton John, we have Queen, but this one was like, wow. Like, this one was really great. It knows exactly what it is, and it goes way past 11. It turns it like 100 times past it. And it's a lot of fun. Are you supposed to take it seriously as like an actual like the history of Elvis? Maybe not, but it's also some of it did happen, and just the way they recreated some of the shots, some of the live TV shows that he did in Elvis's career. Really great recreation of that. So Elvis is my number 10 of the year. But John, what about you?
If I can't dance, I can't sing. I really loved Elvis. I didn't get to put it on my list, but I mean, what a hell of a movie. Like that and like Avatar in terms of a movie experience, and like how much movie you get from those two movies is like you're getting a lot for your money. That's for sure.
Yeah, like the whole like opening sequence of Elvis, like all the crazy edits, the picture in picture, like 20 picture in picture type thing. It was insane, but it was like, this is Elvis. This is what his life was like.
No, it really did a great job of showing just like how he was a person who was larger than life. And I think the film is almost larger in life. And I thought that was a really interesting way to kind of explore it. I mean, everyone just keeps talking about Austin Butler's performance, which obviously he is Elvis, of course, and he's great as Elvis. But no one's talking about just like what a damn just impressive film that is. Not only just to compose all of that, to bring all these scenes together, but the editing, the transitions, like how much special effects is probably involved in that movie alone is probably just staggering, right?
Yeah, it's going to get Oscar love. I think it might. There was like one rumor out there that there was like some Oscar screening that that Academy voters were going to that were like going crazy and they were turning people away at the door type of thing. But now I feel like some of that momentum has like died down. But we'll see.
Well, fortunately, it didn't make my list, but what did make my list is The Northman by Robert Eggers. And I know some people, it was a little too long for them. It gets a little too muddy down into, being a little too authentic, I think, for some people. I think people expected more of a straightforward kind of Braveheart, but they got a mix of a Braveheart and The Witch, which I think is kind of exactly what Robert Eggers is going for. I mean, it is a classic film of his in the way that he loves exploring tone and he loves exploring locations, and he really just seems to obsess over culture and obsess over very distinct culture, whether it is like The Witch, that like 1800s, early 1800s kind of settlement era, or whether it's The Northman, where we're getting into this extreme specific look into this like Viking culture and this Viking world. And what a great performance by Alex Skarsgård and Anya Taylor-Joy right there, just kind of being this beautiful star that she's kind of become over the past couple of years. But, I may agree with some people that the plotting is a little loose at times. I think it could have been a little, tighter in terms of its story, not just its length. But man, you're not going to see a film that's like as visually engrossing as this, really, honestly. And it's going to be really hard to beat that final battle in terms of some of the action that we've seen this year. I really enjoyed The Northman just on a pure spectacle and simple Shakespearean story. I think he did it in a really intense, aggressive, and violent manner. But I mean, I love everything that Eggers has made, and I can't wait to see what he does next. But Ben, tell me what your number 9 is.
My number 9 is a movie we brought up before. That was Clerks 3. I love the Clerks movies. We've bonded over the Clerks movies. It felt like, yeah, if you know me, my top movies of the year, and there's a Clerks movie that comes out, it is going in the top 10. So Clerks 3 was my number 9 movie of the year, and I love it. You know, it's fun. I love the Kevin Smith, filming. Like I grew up with it, and it became like why I wanted to be in production. So seeing like how he's like being meta about like making the movie and making the actual first movie was really great. And then on top of that, I got to see it on his roadshow tour. So I got to like be in a huge theater. He had a whole Q&A. He brought out cast members. After the movie, I saw a big audience, and we laughed, we cried all at the same moments. It was a lot of fun. The opening with the Black Parade, like I had heard him say like, "Oh yeah, I know exactly how I'm gonna open the movie and edit it. I'm gonna edit to the Black Parade." And I was like, "Okay, very interesting." And then watching it, I love the Black Parade. I love it felt like so like yeah, this is a movie made for me. And it gets so emotional, and now I'm thinking about like I just want to cry and watch it again. I just want to watch all those movies like on a continuous loop. So I was a big fan. It's not my favorite Clerks. I think. All right, hear me out. 2-1-3. Is that what you think in terms of Clerks movies?
Man, that's a really hard question because it's like the Star Wars question where it's like, how do you not put Star Wars like at number 1 because it started it all, right? But then it's like, well, it may not be your favorite movie, and it's definitely not my favorite one of the original trilogy. And same probably goes for Clerks. Like, I would probably agree with that, and it's hard to say because it's like number 1 isn't a bad movie. It's like what started his career. It's like an absolute pillar of indie filmmaking. And it's what like so many people probably still look at as to being like the golden light of, I can make it out of my small town. I can make a movie. I can make my dreams come true. So it kind of carries all that baggage with it. So it's hard not to put one higher. But yeah, in terms of just basing it off the film itself, 2, and then yeah, probably 3 and 1. I would have to say. I agree.
Interesting. All right, John. What was your number 8? Or no, your number 9. We're still on number 9.
Yes, my number 9 was Martin McDonagh's wrote and direct The Banshees of Inisherin. And man, what a rich, green, lovely film. And this is just so a lot of people will look at this and be like, well, it's very stagey. It has that kind of like theatrical vibe to it. It's a lot of characters just sitting around talking. But then when you actually see the film, the gorgeous cinematography we get, the like long takes that we get of these characters just kind of taking in their surroundings, and what a great story. It's like an interesting perspective that people have with this film, where I know a lot of people that left and they were just like, that was such a dark movie. Like, that was so dark. And to me, I got out of this film and I was like, that wasn't dark at all. In fact, I laughed, maybe some of the most I've laughed all year in any film. And yes, it's about 2 friends basically completely falling apart, the sister leaving, everything just kind of not really working out for these characters. But that's kind of the whole point of the movie. I think there's some justification behind each of the characters, and there's sympathy, obviously, from Colin Farrell's point of view and Brendan Gleeson's character, where you can kind of relate to him, but he's going way too far and even cutting his own fingers off. Like, it's absurd. It's a very absurd just concept for a film, but is executed with just so much heart. I think it's one of like the warmest and biggest heart of a film that I think we have all year. I think it's definitely going to win for screenplay this year at the Oscars. And I think Colin Farrell definitely deserves to certainly be nominated, if not possibly even win this year for Best Actor. I think he did such a great job in this film and throughout the year, like in films like The Batman or After Yang. I mean, he has just had a crazy 2022. And I think a lot of that comes from The Banshees of Inisherin. Ben, tell me what your 8th top film of 2022 was.
So my number 8 is your number 10, The Northman. I love medieval. I know this is like before medieval type of stuff, but just like I love that type of movie. It feels like a fantasy. I love just the look of the movie, the feel. I get very into these, war, medieval time looking movies. I mean, I'm a huge fan of Lord of the Rings, so put the pieces together and do the math. And I just thought this movie was well acted. Thought it was a really engaging story. I love revenge films. Had a great revenge plot. Ethan Hawke was great in the beginning of the movie. It was kind of obvious what was going to happen to him. I guess we knew it from the trailers as well, but it was just told like really well. And it's a movie that I would definitely want to see again. Would love to see in a movie theater again. Robert Eggers is one of the best up and coming directors. Having only made 3 movies and all 3 of them were bangers, and now he's going to be directing a Nosferatu remake. So that will be interesting to see how that comes out. But I have all the faith in Eggers to pull it off. So The Northman was my number 8 of 2022.
Let me ask you this, because I obviously give my opinions on the film itself, but the movie bombed. In fact, it may be one of the worst bombs of the year in terms of getting its money back. I think it was around $100 million before marketing, and it was under 70. It was around 69 million that it took in. So that is a huge bomb when you consider the marketing budget maybe is an additional 50 million. We're talking maybe 150 for the whole film, and we're not even getting half of that back in its total worldwide gross. So how do you feel about not only just the general reception of this? Obviously, it did really great critically, but of the moviegoers, why do you think people didn't go see this, and how do you feel about it bombing?
I think my face says it all right now, John. And I know we're a podcast, but of course, no one went to this movie. Who sees any movies these days?
That's true. But then I could also point at things like Top Gun and Avatar that are making over $1 billion.
Right. But those are big spectacle movies. We're talking about Robert Eggers. Like his other movies were The Lighthouse and The Witch. How many people are going to see those movies? Like it really, like this was more expansive in terms of like trying to get a bigger audience. There's more money put into it. But these movies are not for like, I don't think like teenagers are actually would be interested in seeing this movie. Like they wouldn't, maybe like 16, 17, 18-year-olds, but anyone below 16 probably wouldn't give a shit about The Northman. Unless they're into fantasy, I don't think it would be like in their radar. And because of that, and then the older people, like people our age, I just don't think that they're just not going to the movies because everyone's comfortable sitting at home. Everyone probably waited for The Northman to come out on demand. They thought it, what time, like what month did that come out again, The Northman? Because we saw it together. So this had to have been like in the springtime. Was it April? Yeah, it was April when that came out. So it's like people are still hanging out inside. I don't know. It's obvious why people want to go see this movie because it's not as wide appealing, and we know that now that non-wide appealing movies just don't do well at the box office.
Yeah, I totally agree. It makes sense. You can definitely tell by the marketing they're pushing for what looked to be a bigger film, looked to be a lot more action heavy and kind of, sword on sword, very intense, but also, weirdly trippy and psychological like Eggers loves to do. So it is a shame because like, man, what a spectacle in terms of the visuals and the overall kind of look of the film, the locations that they get to kind of capture on screen. It's crazy. It's crazy that this film didn't even get its like money back that the budget was. But all I can really say is go watch The Northman. If you haven't seen it, if you kind of were swayed away from it, definitely spend the time to watch it. My 8th best film of 2022 is not even on your list.
Of course.
And I know and I know why. And that is Cronenberg's Crimes of the Future. This is a film I think Cronenberg has been trying to make for, I believe, 40 years, if not a little less than that. I think it's one of the earliest scripts he ever written before he kind of blew up with films like The Fly. And I have mixed feelings about Cronenberg. I love his gross, icky, gooey stuff. I love some of the films that he kind of takes, and I love The Fly, for instance. If I already brought that up, I think it's a really great, enjoyable film that's both very kind of creepy and also very entertaining and heartwarming with a love story in it. And he tries to do a lot in one. And I was just kind of blown away by Crimes of the Future. And I think it may even be one of Cronenberg's best films ever. And that's kind of crazy for a lot of people. I know there's a lot of Cronenberg fans out there. He hasn't really done something that's kind of the body horror, science fiction-y genre in quite some time. So this was kind of a return to form for him. But really, I just thought this was such a sweet film. About a film that's so about visually disgusting things, like about someone growing new organs and having his lover take them out of them. I found this movie to be like weirdly intimate and kind of charming and kind of sweet. And it's just about these two people that kind of love each other. And it's also about like kind of accepting who you are and accepting this kind of gift that you are sometimes given. It's a very complex film, and it's obviously very heavy science fiction, and it's very gross. Obviously, just Cronenberg body horror. It's going to have a lot of visually gross things in it. But I think at the heart of this film is really a love story. And it's a sweet, charming love story.
What? That was not a sweet movie. That was awful. I mean, I'm not like, disgusted by body horror, but it was uncomfortable. I did not get any of those vibes about being a sweet love story. It's romantic. It's like, no, it's kind of like weird. Like what? Like, okay, he can grow organs, and so what? Like, there's just not, like, I think there's like no world building in that movie. And I think that movie is just so like, yeah, we're just gonna show his body horror. We're just gonna like all the cool effects, and it's gonna be like these weird contraptions that he has to use that are like, you know, human, but also like robotic, and like we're not going to explain like how any of this works, and it's just gonna like, is this Earth? Is this not Earth? Like, how did this happen? We're not going to say how it happened. And it was not for me. I tried. You guys told me that it was a great movie. I thought it would be good. I watched it, and I was like, what the fuck are my friends think is good? Like,
well, it's made my top 10 for sure.
Yeah.
And I think it's wonderful, honestly. I think it's maybe about visually disgusting things, but at the core of it, it's really just about, you know, learning to accept yourself and learning to appreciate the person that's next to you, you know, really to the heart of it. No matter if they grow extra organs or not, Ben, okay? It's the new form of sex, bro.
No, it is not.
All right, move on. Tell me your number 7, God damn it.
All right, my number 7, which you mentioned before, was The Banshees of Inisherin. That movie, that was interesting. You said that it was like funny. Like, I laughed at some of those parts too, but I thought it was like very much supposed to be dark. I thought this movie was supposed to be sad. It's supposed to make you question like your own friendships and your own relationships with people.
Yeah, sure.
And which I had a good time with it, and I thought the acting was phenomenal. The cinematography is beautiful. I mean, the way they capture, you know, Ireland that way is like, oh, that ending shot is just, it's like a painting almost. So McDonough like did a great job of directing the movie, and I just thought that it was, you know, talking about, you know, when you say it's like a lot of like staging, there's a lot of talking like there is, and then comparing it to like women talking, which I recently saw, and that's literally just women talking. And I think the thing is with this is that it's like a new idea of like about friendship and kind of like building your own life like for yourself and like what you actually want in life, where some of the subject matter in women talking is not that it's been done before, but it also has been done before. And it's just like, this is like, women talking is like fine, but like when you talk about like a really dialogue heavy film like The Banshees of Inisherin, it kind of takes an extra step. It does something that's a little bit different than what we're used to. It's dark, there's humor, and there's a lot of like beautiful cinematography in it. So for me overall, it's a really great movie. It's probably going to win a couple Oscars. If Brendan Fraser doesn't win Best Actor, that's because Colin Farrell does. So this movie is going to get a lot of love. It's going to get a lot more looks. It's on HBO now, I think. So that's obviously going to increase interest in the movie. So yeah, that's my number 7, The Banshees of Inisherin.
My number 7 is another film, not even on Ben's list, and that is Barbarian. Ooh. I think it's without a doubt the scariest film of 2022. I think it's one of the, if not the most original horror film of the year. And I've really talked about this on a bunch of different occasions, I think, on the podcast, where I just love movies that just try to have it all. sometimes that doesn't work at all. Sometimes you try to make a movie that is both filled with, tears, filled with laughter, filled with screaming. There's a lot of emotions that you try to kind of draw out as a filmmaker. And if you're able to do almost everything in one movie, it's damn impressive. And I think Zach Cregger, who wrote and directed Barbarian, did a hell of a good job. And I think this is so good. This is one of the best first film. I actually think it's his second film, because he made a film a long time ago, like over a decade ago, that was a comedy that like never really got off the ground and it was reviewed really poorly. So it's amazing to see him come back so many years later. Yeah, his first film was all the way back in 2009 called Miss March. And it was a comedy, like dude bro comedy about two guys like trying to find a Playboy bunny, I think. So like to him to come back almost 15 years later and direct this horror comedy and make it so compelling and dramatic, I was like absolutely blown away. I think Barbarian does such a good job of balancing tone when it comes to the humor, balancing it with how truly terrifying this movie is at times. I mean, it's a classic thought that we always have. You wake up in the middle of the night, you look to the doorway, your closet, the door to leave your bedroom, and you just like think you see something. You look into that doorway and you're like, I swear there's someone fucking just standing there. And then you like rub your eyes and you're like, okay, I'm losing my mind. And that is the best way to describe Barbarian. It's like that for straight up an hour and a half, just torturing you as the viewer. And I love movies like that, and it has this tons of twists and turns. It knows exactly what it's doing, even down to the casting. It knows exactly why they're casting Justin Long, why you're casting Bill Skarsgård. Bill Skarsgård has become like this horror icon. So you cast him in a role where you're like, this fucking dude's going to be the bad guy. He's going to be the scary, creepy guy. And then, spoiler, there's a lot more to it than just that. And the film just, oh my God, I can gush and gush and gush about this movie. In fact, like talking about it more and more makes me even want to bump it up higher in my list. I liked it so much. And I was just so impressed and so absolutely terrified about where that movie goes and the lengths it takes. Yes, it gets very goofy and ridiculous by the end of it, but I was there for it. I was there for the whole ride, and I was willing to just kind of ride it to the end. So Barbarian is my 7th favorite film of 2022.
Yeah, and it's funny you bring up Bill Skarsgård, because I was just looking it up, and he's going to be in Robert Eggers' Nosferatu as Nosferatu.
There you go. There you go.
Yeah, so yeah, he's great. I love Barbarian. I guess that would be like my number 12 movie of the year, so it was pretty close to my top 10. Just there's one other horror movie on my list that I guess I will put above it, and we'll get to it when we get there. But moving on to number 6, I went with Top Gun Maverick. And wow, that movie was like, that could have been my biggest surprise of the year. Like, I went into that movie thinking, all right, it's just going to be really cool, like, just fun, like, bro-y stuff. It's going to be a lot of like planes and all this shit. It'll be, similar to the first movie, but it just goes so much farther than my expectations. Like, I did not expect the cinematography to be what the cinematography was, and seeing it on a big screen with like huge sound was like riding a roller coaster with it. There's so much tension. That first scene is so tense, and like you're like literally on the grip on the edge of your seat, and the way that, some of the shot choices in that sequence when they go like right to the clock, like the speedometer when he's going like to 10G, it's insane. Like it's such a great use of camera, such great approach to filmmaking with some special effects, but a lot of like in camera effects. Like they really were flying fighter jets themselves and going at these crazy top speeds. So Top Gun Maverick, one of the best movies. It has no business being as good as it is, and this movie like has a legitimate argument to be the best picture winner of the year. Like there's actually a legit argument for it. And Tom Cruise has a legit argument for best actor. I'm just gonna say that too.
Yeah, it's crazy. That would be honestly amazing to see him nominated. If that did happen, that would be like honestly just exciting. It's just amazing seeing how like high this movie really has flown. And you'll definitely see it later on my list. But my number 6 is a Korean film. In fact, I think it might be the only non-American film on my list now that I'm looking at it. Yes, that's true. And that is Decision to Leave. And this is a Korean film that is, again, I'm now putting this together as well. I just have a thing for twisted love stories, I guess. This is another film that's about twisted love story, and it's about a detective who's investigating a man who kind of fell while climbing a tall mountain, and there's maybe some suspicion around the wife who may be involved in the murder. And it seems like a kind of straightforward story that then takes tons of twists and turns and does a lot of really great stuff with its camera work, really incredible transitions. Like, if you were to give the best editing cinematography award purely based on transitions, this film would win hands down over any other film this year. It's honestly unbelievable at times. It's the way you watch a film and you're like, what? Like, was that in a script? Did they just make that up on the day? Like, was that always there on paper? The way they can transition from scene to scene and characters kind of transition into a scene before the first scene ends. And I know that sounds like it doesn't make any sense, but when you watch the film, you'll definitely understand what I mean. And just some amazing camera work and just tons of constant, like, Spielbergian kind of push in, dolly out, like really amazing cinematography. And this movie will just keep you on the edge of your seat the entire time. Like, as soon as you think it's climaxed, it just has another 2 climaxes coming right after it. And wow, I was really blown away by this. And I was so saddened that I didn't get to see this in theaters. I got to see it on the iPad while traveling in a car. So that kind of pains me as someone who loves movie theaters, but really encouraged to check out Decision to Leave. But Ben, let's move on and tell me your 5th favorite film of 2022.
My number 5 is Everything Everywhere All at Once. This movie, did not know what to expect with it. And then, you see posters for it, you hear about like, oh, it's another A24 movie. So I'm like, okay, like I'm definitely going to go see it. Seems like a fun time. And then I start to hear like, oh no, this is a really great movie. And I'm like, oh yeah, I'm sure it is. And then I go see the movie. I'm like, that was a really great movie. And it was original. It was fun. Michelle Yeoh kicks ass in the movie. She like so many different genres you cover in that film. The editing, that like if that movie doesn't win best film editing, there's something wrong with voters, because there's crazy sequences in that. The rock scene is pure, just the human condition. Just one of the most, like, using rocks is like humanistic almost with that scene. So it's a great movie. I was talking to somebody today at work and they were like, oh yeah, I have to just go see that movie. I'm like, you still haven't seen this movie? Like, isn't it like on all, like it's on HBO or Hulu, right? So like it has to be accessible for some people. So
I know. I think it's still in theaters. Like, it's been one of like the longest running films in theaters all year. Maybe Top Gun is probably the only film that's beaten it, really. In terms of how long it's been in theaters. Yeah, so that goes.
I mean, I love the movie, so it's going to get a lot of Oscar love. There's a lot of, seems to be some groundswell that this is, like, it's starting to take over The Fabelmans, potentially for Best Picture. I still think it won't win Best Picture, but I wouldn't be surprised at the end of the day that it does. So, saying that right now, potential Oscar winner for Best Picture, Everything Everywhere All at Once, but probably not. But yeah, that's my number 5 of the year.
I will have more to say on that film very soon, but my 5th favorite film, we're getting into top 5 now, fam. It's getting serious. It's getting real. My 5th favorite film of the year is Jordan Peele's Nope. And I love this movie so much that I'm willing to say it's his best movie that he's ever made. I love...
No.
What's that face, you son of a bitch? I love this movie so much, and it's a movie that I saw twice in theaters. It really grew on me after I saw it the first time. It's one of those movies where they did a great job of hiding the marketing, and they built the mystery like they seem to do for all of his films, is creating the mystery of why and what and who. And this is a perfect example of amazing marketing, just enticing you by the fact that, oh, I think there's aliens. Is this an invasion film? Like, what exactly is this? And I spoiled a lot of the films so far on my list, but I won't spoil Nope. I just think Jordan Peele has really taken it to the next level when it comes to this film in terms of his budget. Obviously, it has been blown up. We're really seeing that with these huge IMAX cameras. I'm really saddened that it was pushed out of IMAX theaters. I forget what pushed it out of theaters, but I think it was actually Wakanda Forever, which pushed it out of the IMAX theaters. But I really wanted to see this in IMAX. I wish they would re-release it just to give us another chance to see it in the real format that it's supposed to be in. But I just was really, it's not very often that you see a film about a brother and sister and the love that a brother and sister share and like the bond that you have and the bond that you have just not only from being family, but from losing a loved one, from trying to work through hardships, whether it's a science fiction hardship like we see in this film. I just love different kinds of stories, and I don't think it's really easy to make a film that's about a brother and sister like that, and while also interweaving other characters, interweaving the sci-fi story, making it also about this like a separate story about this, I'll leave it at that. I don't want to go too into Nope. If you haven't seen it, really check out Jordan Peele's Nope, because it is fantastic. Ben, what is your fourth favorite film of 2022?
So I wish I had said this before we even started with the ranking. Some of this is just like very arbitrary for me for like how I rank movies. And I threw this movie on there and I knew I wanted to like really, really put it high up just because I knew that would be your reaction. I was surprised it's on my top 10. I wouldn't even have thought when I saw this movie that I would be like this fascinated by it and actually appreciate the originality. I feel it's very original. I haven't seen a movie that does that, and the ending of it was so sinister. So my number 4 movie of 2022 is Smile. I just love the concept. I thought they did for something so simplistic of like, this monster comes after you, and like before you see it, the person who's like possessed by it is like smiling really menacingly. And like the marketing for that was great. The poster for that is great. I have like the poster on my computer up right now, and I'm like, I'll get that away from me. And just the way it's shot, there's this one scene that I just love so much because it's so sadistic and creepy. And I won't spoil it. I won't talk about it right now. But it got me in the theater where I was like, oh my God, it's probably in the theater with me type of thing. And I'm not saying this is like a movie that's like so underrated that people aren't talking about it and like they need to appreciate this more. This is like just a personal thing for me, but I love Smile. I love the way it ends. I was not expecting that ending and the result of it, and such a psychological movie. Really, I had a great time watching it. I might want to watch it again just to like I have some family that likes horror movies, so they listen to some of my recommendations. I was like, watch Smile. You have to go watch Smile. So maybe I'll watch it with them.
You know what? I give you shit for it, and it's not because I hate the movie. I just think it's a movie that shouldn't be as good as it is, right? It's a movie that uses a lot of horror tropes in terms of jump scares and cueing music and, having a head twist out when you're not expecting it to, a smile to be seen here. And it is an interesting idea for a horror film. I'll definitely give it that. I'll definitely give it that it's very scary. If you're going to do cliches in horror, like classic jump scares, you better pull them off. And I think the movie does a really good job of doing that. I wanted to pull it up. First of all, what do you think the budget of Smile is? What did they make that movie for?
Maybe 10 million at the most.
It was made for 17 million, which is extremely just low in general. I think without a doubt, it's the lowest budget film on both of our lists. And it was originally supposed to be sent to Paramount. And because of reactions from audience, it got such a crazy reaction from people screaming and yelling about how creepy it was that they were like, wow, this has, theatrical potential. Send it into theaters. The movie has made $216 million now. on a $17 million budget. So it's by far the biggest, box office success in terms of its budget to box office. It's really incredible. And I think Sosie Bacon, who is the lead in that film and is the daughter of Kevin Bacon, a classic Nepo baby. It's the year of Nepo babies.
Not the Nepo baby.
And I'm not going after her for being a Nepo baby. I think we had a great conversation about Nepo babies that maybe we'll save for another podcast. But I thought she had an incredible performance for someone who hasn't been in many things. I remember seeing her in Mayor of Easttown, and she was really wonderful in that. But, I thought this was a great lead performance. I thought she had a lot of potential of like where we can go from here in terms of like her just authentic, just truly terrified performance throughout this movie. And I just like was thinking it must be awful to make a movie like this where you just like are constantly distressed and supposed to be anxious and supposed to be looking over your shoulder. Like, and you have to live like that for like 3 months. So God bless her. The Nepo baby that she is.
I do not want to see a smile too because of the way this movie ended. Like, I think it very much proved that like you can't continue the story of how they end it. It would just be the same thing, kind of, I think, repeated. So
yes, it will. I completely disagree with that. I think not only will they make it, they'll pick it up right where it ended.
No.
They'll pick it up right where it ended and continue the story forward because it made so much money and it has perfect potential to be picked up for a sequel and continuing that chain. So
no, it's
prepare
so
to be disappointed.
It's so pure. It's so pure and original and just so. Oh no! Don't sequelize it. Just think of other things. Think of like how else we can be creative. Well, this is creative. Use
I'll
other
really
first-time
tell you
directors.
About something that's truly creative and original.
Yes,
and that's
before you say what your number 4 is. I wanted to put this on my top 10. I really did. But I sort of knew you would put it on there, and I was okay. Like, okay, at least he represents it. But there is, you'll say it, and we'll talk about it.
It's crazy that you put Elvis over top of this. But my number 4 top 10 film of 2022 is Damien Chazelle's Babylon. And if you've been following Worthy, you've been following the podcast here, you know that I'm a huge fan of Damien Chazelle. I absolutely love every film that he's ever made, except for his first film, which I still haven't seen. I'll get to it eventually, Mr. Damien. I'll definitely get there. But I loved Babylon. I loved it way more than I really was even expecting. I think the film got a lot of criticism and it got a lot of flack. I think there's a lot of people that just don't really want to see a movie all about Hollywood. And it's funny because the movie is, yes, it's all about these people in Hollywood, but it's like intentionally showing the underbelly of Hollywood, and it's showing the messiness of it, how you can be a star 1 minute and forgotten the next. And it, I try to make a top 10 that has varying degrees of not only genres, but different kinds of films. And I think when I get to the top 5 here, it's kind of a lot of films that I've seen more than once. I'm definitely going to go see Babylon again in theaters before it leaves, because I was just enthralled by this story, this kind of winding road of chaos and drugs and piss and shit and everything that's in this movie. It is just overwhelming, and that's the intention. And it's showing the messy situation that was Hollywood. And obviously we get a lot of joy and we get a lot of out of it than probably a lot of others that don't, starting this journey at exactly 1929 with the first Best Picture winner, and then like jumping into this movie taking place almost right around the same exact time. It felt weirdly kind of personal in a way because of this journey that we've been on throughout cinema. And this film, not only does the film do this, but it kind of takes our central character played by Diego Calva, and it takes him on a journey that you just don't really expect. And obviously the journey has a lot of highs, it has a lot of lows, but the film is not just a story. And that's kind of really what I want to talk about, is that films can be more than that. They can tell a story that maybe gives a message. Sometimes the characters can give messages that you may not agree with, or maybe even the film itself doesn't agree with. And this film does this weird thing where I'm really trying not to spoil it, but the film takes us into the eyes of our protagonist. It kind of shows his imagination in a way, and it kind of takes us beyond. And I thought it was one of the most fascinating endings to any film that we've seen this year. And what a bold movie. You know, I'll take a movie that is just bold as all hell. It may have some issues here and there. It may be definitely too long, but if you're willing to just swing and really try to knock it out of the park, I don't care if you've missed a couple of those swings. But I think this movie connects and it lands, and I thought it was absolutely enchanting in the best way possible.
Yeah, I love Babylon, and I like kind of wish I put it in my top 10, but again, like I knew we would get to talk about it. To me, the movie, the faults were way too prevalent though. Like it is too long. There's a good like 15 minutes I think you could have taken out of the movie, and I think it would have made the same points go faster and faster. I love the ending. I think that the ending is extremely bold. It's very much it's very much Damien Chazelle saying like movies are here. It is a part of us. There's a reason why it's been so intertwined and a part of culture, and why it's so highly regarded. Like, yeah, there's a lot of piss and shit involved in it, and it's maybe not the most like artistic art that you think of. But at the same time, it's provided so much for culture, for community. So I love the ending. But yeah, just some of the partying, not that I don't like it, but it felt like so excessive to a point where it's like, okay, I kind of get it. So I wish it could have been more streamlined. But then some of the scenes where, like the two big scenes of the old Hollywood before sound and then the Hollywood with sound, and I won't say much more than that. Like those two scenes and sequences are like why like I like it's so fascinating. It's why I love old Hollywood, love learning about that history of it, and it's a fun time. But I just think that some of the faults, like you say, like it takes swings and it's like huge swings, but because they don't land for me, it's like why it falls like out of my top
Which
10.
is totally fair. I think maybe even on a second viewing, because I'm not so enthralled by the actual technical process of making it. You know, I think a lot of times when a film is so technically impressive, I can just get caught up in, wow, like how the hell did they do that, in a way that kind of adds points for me to a film. And I think definitely the party sequence is like so impressive in just terms of like how they physically pulled that off. And it's definitely probably too long though. I would probably agree. And yeah, there are probably sequences or moments that you could probably cut out, but I even saw this on some people's worst films list of the year, and that is like insane to
Boo.
me. Like
Boo.
that is like unreal. Like purely technical. If you were to just watch this movie, like how could you ever think that this is one of the worst movies of the year?
And they probably have like Turning Red as like their top movie of the year.
hey, no bashing Turning Red. That was a cute film.
I will. Maybe.
Yeah.
God,
you can't say shit. You didn't even finish that movie, okay?
I couldn't finish that movie.
God damn it. Okay, move on. Tell me your number 3, you son of a bitch.
Moving on to a movie which I saw twice within a 3-day span when it came out in both Dolby and IMAX, and a movie that I put on again, The Batman. That movie was so good. When I saw The Dark Knight as a kid, I was like, this movie is top level. Like I knew how great that movie was, and I am not saying this movie is like at that level, but it's not that far behind. It really isn't. It's a truly phenomenal movie. The score, it did not make the Oscar shortlist for score, which is stupid. It makes no sense why like any other score this year would be better than what was composed for this movie. It is phenomenal. Matt Reeves did a great job directing the movie. Robert Pattinson was a great choice to play Batman and Bruce Wayne. I remember walking out of that movie. I saw it with you. I remember walking out and being like, I've never seen a character and a superhero being like, I want to fucking die. I would rather that I get killed right now than keep living. Like that was his whole persona. The Nirvana music put into it. The way it's shot, the Riddler is a great villain. It builds this huge world. I'm excited for the next one. As soon as that movie was over, I went right into the subreddit for it. I was looking at what everyone was thinking, what they were saying, what they want to see in the next movie. So I love it, and I'm very hopeful and excited to see where the next. I think they're gonna do 2 more of these Batman movies with Matt Reeves and Pattinson. So I'm a big fan of the Patman. I'm a big fan of that movie, the way it looks. It should get way more love and way more attention, like the Top Gun Maverick level attention. Everything Everywhere All at Once attention, and it's not, and I don't understand why. But Batman's my number 3 of the year.
It is hard to say why. I won't go too much into the film because it'll spoiler appear again on my list, but it's interesting why it hasn't kind of stayed in the way that Top Gun has. Maybe because Top Gun came out still 3 months after it, so that could just be it. It could just be people really just enamored by the flying sequences, and I don't know, maybe people are over Batman. Maybe Batman has peaked with the Dark Knight trilogy and they're moving forward. I don't know. Maybe they just don't want Patterson as Batman either. There's a lot of things it could be, you know?
I mean, it's better than, The Dark Knight Rises. At least to me, I liked it better.
Oh, I agree. I'll agree. I want to talk about the Batman so bad. So my number 3 is your number 6, and that is Top Gun Maverick. You said you did a great job summarizing this movie. I saw this movie 3 times in 3 different types of quality. I saw this movie in IMAX. I think it was actually Dolby the first time I saw it. Then I saw it in 4DX, which involves the moving chairs, shooting out water, jet streams. Sometimes it'll snow. In fact, when they do the final mission, it's literally started snowing in the theater. It was so cool. I saw this movie more times than I saw any other movie throughout this year because it was just an absolute thrill ride. There's no other movie other than Avatar that I could point to this year that absolutely takes you on a journey, and it takes you on something that feels like an experience by the time you get through it. And this may seem bad in a lot of ways, but it's almost like a video game in the way that here is our goal. We set up our mission, and it's this. It's like the plotting of this film is literally ABC. Like, it couldn't be more simple of a film plot. It's just, this is what's so fascinating about movie making, is that movies are formulas. Literally, we have formulated just the hero's journey into a formula. So there's so many formulas that make up the movie formula, and we've gotten it down to a point where you can try your hardest. You can really get some of the best people to help you make it, to be in front of the camera, behind the camera, and you can just still run into issues and problems that just forever ruin parts of the movie. And to make a movie that takes place in the sky for most of it, and they actually do it and film it all in camera and have it done in a way that's completed, that you can tell what's going on, you can feel where characters are, you understand the editing at such a rapid speed. It's just phenomenal that they were able to do this. And it's of course, that's why the plot is so simple, because there's so much more to do in this film than just take your characters from A, B, and C in the story. So it is unbelievable as a film because it's just that perfectly made, and it's just dazzling. I mean, it truly made me grip my seat it's truly like that. You want to tear the foam out of your theater seat when you watch that movie because it is just all high velocity. It's still unbelievable that they made that movie, and they made it in the way that they did. And it's so funny too, talking about it on this podcast, because we started with Wings, and even way back, almost 100 years ago now. It's funny how much time has changed. And I wish... Okay, I'll leave it at that. I really want to spoil some of these movies, but yeah, I absolutely love Top Gun. It's my 3rd favorite film of 2022. Ben, what's your 2nd favorite film of 2022?
So I went back and forth with mine 1 and 2, and for a while this was my number 1, but the other movie I put number 1, which I'll get to, I decided at the end of the day, I think that is my favorite movie of the year. But this movie that I really loved was Empire of Light, Sam Mendes movie starring Olivia Colman. It just had everything that I look for in a movie. It's dramatic. There's romance and love. There's great cinematography, engaging story. It's about cinema. It's about, a lot. There's a few sequences where they talk about using a projector and how, when you really think about it, that all film is just light with just different colors being splashed in front of it. That's such a beautiful way to put it. And so I really enjoyed it. The movie It had a lot to do with race, but did it in a different approach, different way, about a love between a younger guy and an older woman. It had a lot to do with mental health and being aware and being okay to not be okay and getting help. And it really, it's a dark journey, but there's a lot of like hope and light at the end of it, literally Empire of Light. And it also featured some just great rude boy music from the coastal towns of England. Like, I love that type of music. So it just had everything. It really felt like Sam Mendes this was a life, like it felt like a very personal movie. Like, I feel like he had to, like, maybe he grew up in a seaside town in the UK. Maybe he had an art house cinema called the Empire of Light or something similar to it. So I really appreciate that movie, and it's not getting all the love and attention. I think it's because it was so limited, but it's a really very underrated movie, and I would implore people to go watch it. It has a great heart, great acting. Again, beautiful cinematography. Roger Deakins was the cinematographer for it, so you know you're going to get great, just overall quality when it comes to the pictures and the film itself. So, Empire of Light was my number 2.
That's interesting because I've seen a very mixed reaction to that film in particular, and it seemed like before it came out it was going to be like a front runner, like everyone's talking about it, and now I feel like literally no one's talking about it.
It's all of the Turning Red people.
Moving on, my number 2 is your number 5, and that's Everything Everywhere All at Once. Michelle Yeoh, what an absolute legend. What an absolute legend. And I was actually watching her actor on actor with Cate Blanchett. I think it's Variety that does those on YouTube, but really great little videos that have actors interviewing each other. And Cate Blanchett was describing Everything Everywhere All at Once as being this perfect film that almost like summarizes her career in a way, where obviously, yes, we have the mixed martial arts, but we show so many aspects of not only who Michelle Yeoh is, but what women are really, and what mothers in our lives mean, and what women do for the world, and how just as simple as a mother-daughter relationship can drastically change the world. It's such a sweet movie that has like no right of being as charming and endearing as it is. And then it's also this weird science fiction movie about alternate realities and interacting with your variations of yourself, and a reality where your fingers are hot dogs, and a reality where there's butt plugs as awards. And like, it just goes, the Daniels cross a line that I would just never expect that line to be crossed. And they do it in a way that's now becoming an Oscar film, a nominated film, a worthy film. And they have made a film where people have hot dog fingers, where people shove dildo awards up their butt, and all at the end you can still cry. Like, it's unbelievable, the film that they made. It has no right being as good as it is, and it is. It's just so unbelievable. And the nods to other universes, the nods to films like Ratatouille, to other classic Chinese cinema, and I'm blanking on the director's name, but like, just such great film references, such great references to Michelle Yeoh's own life and her career. Just what an absolute wonderful film. So close to being my favorite film of the year, but it was just beaten out by one film in particular. But before I say what that is, Ben, tell me your favorite film of last year, 2022.
My favorite movie was The Fabelmans. I said it was the movie that made me cry the most. I felt a huge personal connection to the movie as an American Jew, just like Steven Spielberg. This movie, it's so beautiful, and just was not expecting it to be what it was. I really didn't know what the movie was going to be about, and then seeing opening sequence about the greatest show on earth, and it's like, we had fun talking about that movie. We both didn't love it. We both were like, yeah, it's not worthy of a Best Picture winner, but you can just tell, and like, we talked about how much Spielberg liked that movie, but you can just tell like he truly loves that movie because of how inspiring it is. And then that automatically was just like, well, what are the movies that I love? Like, what are the sequences that I love that I would take my toys and recreate. And, I think of Star Wars, I think of Lord of the Rings. It's truly, he does such a great job of telling stories, of capturing emotions at every age group. Like, he knows exactly what a 5-year-old would think watching The Greatest Show on Earth versus then a high schooler making a movie about, their senior year and their senior beach trip. Like, so personal and so effective. It's sad, like, what some of the movie is about, because it is based off his life, the stuff of his mother. So coming from like that much of a broken home, like, must have, like, it's obvious, like, why he's such a great artist, because of how much, like, personal darkness and sadness that he had to deal with and overcome, and then how he's able to channel that into filmmaking. Where we've talked about three, I didn't have Babylon on my list, but we have Babylon, Empire of Light, and The Fablemans, all about movie and the process of filmmaking, of projecting film, of how to, like, the actual art of film. And it's such a great story to have. And I still think it's going to win Best Picture. To me, this is the definition of a Best Picture win. Like, when I watch this movie and put it against all the other Best Picture winners, like, this lines up perfectly. It makes sense. Spielberg does a phenomenal, like, he's going to win another directing award. He's going to be put into an elite company of having 3+ Oscars. Just a very good movie. And again, like, representing Jewish culture, like, the Hanukkah sequence was so accurate. It felt like so accurate that, like, yeah, if I did have a big toy, it would have been separated, like, over the, like, a couple of nights of just having the one part. Like, felt so real to, like, my life, so many other parts of it. So it's unfortunate, like, the box office numbers doesn't reflect, like, the quality of the movie. And it's just like, people aren't going to the movies, and it's unfortunate. Like, now, like, people will probably mostly see this movie on demand on some streaming platform. And if that is what they have to do, then that's what they have to do for people to watch it. But I would encourage people to go see it. It's an emotional journey. It has some very funny parts, some parts that will make you truly think about yourself, and I think in a good way. It's a great reflection film. Judd Hirsch, like, his one scene in the movie is like that. Like, it's one of the best scenes and sequences of the year, and truly talking about what you do for your art. What would you suffer? What are you willing to do to be part of the circus of entertainment, of the circus of whatever industry you want to be a part of? So I can go on and on about The Fablemans, but that was my number one, hands down, best movie of the year.
That's a great choice. I think it's probably my number 11. Honestly, it just didn't make my list, but not because I didn't like it. I really enjoyed it. It's such a sweet love letter to what movies are. And I thought that was really interesting that like you mentioned, we get so many films about movie making, and Babylon is about very specific time in Hollywood, about, the legacy of film, what actors and films kind of leave behind, what that really means. What is filmmaking in terms of the whole spectrum of art as humans? While The Fablemans is how films change people, and not just film as in a big motion feature like The Fablemans, but even a little short film that Mr. Young Spielberg, or this character in The Fablemans, made, and how it kind of can affect even the school bullies in his school, and how that changes their opinion of him, and maybe it changes for the good or for worse. And I just loved how it was a lot of conversations about art and filmmaking, and what it really means to make a film, and what it means to see people's lives shown on screen, and how that affects you. And I did connect with it very much like you did. I think as people that have dreamed and thought about things and making their own TV shows and movies, it's hard not to relate to The Fablemans. But I don't think there's anyone more who I relate with than my boy Batman. And my favorite film of 2022 is The Batman. Matt Reeves grabbed up the vampire boy, Mr. Pattinson himself, and turned him into Batman. And I love the way you described this movie by just talking about the way we discussed it afterwards, and how you're so fascinated by this character just openly admitting to wanting to die, and just die on the battlefield, basically. And I just love that description because it's so accurate. I mean, it's almost direct dialogue from the film, but I've loved Batman ever since I was such a kid, honestly. It's been such a character that's been so constant in my life that I don't even remember when he even entered my life, honestly. It just feels like he's always been there, right? As a second dad. And I never felt that I've seen my favorite Batman on screen until the Batman this year. And I feel that way because of a bunch of different reasons. I think we have so many different variations of this character, and they've all changed in tone and the way the costume looks and the way the world looks. But I don't think we've gotten an interpretation of Batman that has been this close to the comics. When I read like The Long Halloween, which is one of my favorite Batman comics of all time, it just feels like so much like this world of the Batman. It's like moody and gray, and it still has a lot of vibrancy when it comes to the neon lights, the streets, and they utilize the volume heavily throughout this film, and it doesn't look like shows that you may watch on Disney Plus that use the volume. Like, they really innovated and mixed practical effects with these new filmic iterations. So not only is it an amazing story about a character that I really love and what I think is my favorite Bat costume, my favorite interpretation of Bruce Wayne in particular as a character, and the way he hides and he prefers to be Batman. That's the way I've always kind of seen Batman and in the past. And while I love the Dark Knight trilogy, I love what Nolan did. They're spy films, they're heist films. They're basically his chance to make a costume James Bond, basically. You know, they're very suave and slick and sleek, and that's cool. Like, I love that Batman has become a character that we can take and just interpret him. They've become our Greek gods that we can tell stories about, and I love that, and about superheroes and superhero fandom and fiction. And I love that we can explore it, and it's amazing to see that they brought this character to life once again, and brought it to life in a way that I've like always dreamed about as a kid. Like this dirty, gross city that this guy just is obsessed with wearing this costume and becoming this character because he refuses to live his real life. And man, what a great performance. And it also, the film was made in such hard conditions with the pandemic. It had so many delays. Robert Pattinson had so many issues, and he even had COVID, I think, while filming that movie, which caused a delay. So knowing also the background of how they made that movie and all the crap they went through to get it done makes it that much more impressive. And I loved The Batman. It is my favorite movie of 2022. You already have The Batman on your list, Ben.
Done.
Anything else you want to say about The Batman, though?
Maybe they're not talking enough about the Riddler and Paul Dano, and how like Paul Dano is just now this, like, why isn't Paul Dano in more movies? I know he's in The Fabelmans, but he should be in like every
great year
movie.
for Paul Dano.
It was a great year for Paul Dano, and I hope it keeps on building. Like Paul Dano, I want to see him in more stuff. Like, that's an actor who I appreciate, who I think has great ability and acting chops. So give me more Paul Dano.
Oh, I totally agree with that, and you're absolutely right. What a great interpretation of the Riddler. It's creepy, it's modern. I think it takes from a lot of our society today and puts a creepy twist on it and gives us a cool villain that it doesn't have to be this straight up brawling fight for Batman, which is a cool thing to see. Alrighty, I thought it would be a fun way to end this top 10 of 2022 by just bringing it all back. This is worthy after all. We got to talk about the Oscars. So Ben, before we go here, I just want to ask you two more questions. First, what is one Oscar prediction you have? It's now January. Give me your prediction here.
So I could have played this many ways, and to me, this is actually the safest thing I could have gone with, and that Top Gun Maverick will walk away with at least one Oscar on Oscar night. I don't know which one. I don't know if, I feel like sound is like a very good option for it to win. Potentially special effects, although I think with Avatar, like that's probably what's going to win. I think cinematography has potential, but then beyond that, there's maybe another technical category or two. But I think it walks away with at least one Oscar on Oscar night.
I think Best Song even has a possibility. It could win. I mean, it's Lady Gaga. I think about how many times people have seen that movie, and like maybe they're like, oh yeah, I like love that song now because I've seen this movie like 3 times, you know?
Yeah. Well, ideally, like it would win Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actor, Best Supporting Actor, Best Original Screenplay, Best Cinematography.
Oh man,
Everything. Sweep the board.
I have one. Yeah, you did go for such a softball there. So I took a leap. I'm saying that this is Michelle Yeoh's year. She's going to win Best Actress for Everything Everywhere All at Once. I think it's just a perfect summation of her career. She's such a legacy and icon in both here and Chinese films. And it would just be a great way to kind of honor her and honor that film. I think that film is so weird and out there that it can't win something like Best Screenplay or Best Picture. I would be amazed if that does happen, but I really think it's just too out there for the Academy. But I think her performance and her being the center of that movie, it's perfect for her to win Best Actress. I think it's an amazing demonstration of you being the best actress. So it has to. I can't wait. But Ben, before we go here, give me just an Oscar hope that you have. Not a prediction. This is something you really just hope it happens in your heart.
Yeah, so I'm sticking to maybe a softball kind of thing, but I really do want Brendan Fraser to win for The Whale for Best Actor. I know there's been a lot of controversy with the film. You know, people don't love Aronofsky. The criticism, again, like I said way earlier, was just like, I just don't think it's very fair. Fraser just does a great performance in the movie. So emotional. It's so unexpected. The control he has with his voice in the movie. I don't know. Maybe it's more sound mixing with that, but just really great facial movement and that, like, that's the key. The entire role is like how he uses his face and to deliver a lot of the emotion and just like unsaid dialogue through his eyes. And I hope he does win. It seems like he's probably not at this point, but it's still early to tell. But I really want him to win. I think he deserves it. I think this movie is criminally attacked. So Brendan Fraser, Best Actor, The Whale. John, what about you? What's your one Oscar hope?
I would really love that, just because he seems like he's just the sweetest human. Everyone seems to love him this year, and what a sweet nightcap it would be for his 2022 career. It just would be a perfect time for him to win. There's definitely hot competition, and we'll talk about that soon here at Worthy. But my Oscar hope is a kind of curveball. It's not even a film on my top 10, but I really, really enjoyed The Good Nurse, as I mentioned earlier, and I think Eddie Redmayne deserves Best Supporting Actor, and it would be a nice little nod to that movie. I think that film is extremely well written, and it's extremely nuanced, and we don't honor nuanced performances as much. And it's a character, if you don't know, it's called The Good Nurse, and it's about a character who was basically killing patients. And I won't say why or how or get into any of the specifics, but he was killing patients and getting away with it because of the medical system. And they go kind of very in depth in it in a very, very laid back and non-dramatic way, which I really appreciated. But I think Eddie Redmayne has already won an Oscar before. I think he does an amazing performance, because what we're used to seeing from him is a big exaggerated performance. These wild performances where he's Stephen Hawking's and, you know, he's disabled, so he has to really transform himself to really portray this character. But here we have someone he's one of those complex characters that hides in a shell, and he really tries to hide himself, and he changes around in certain people, and he gets pinned in certain positions and really reveals who he is as a person. And that's extremely hard to do as an actor, and I think it's extremely subtle, and it would be a great nod for that kind of performance and that kind of acting. So thank you for joining us. I hope everyone had a great 2022, and we're on to Worthy episode. What, Ben? What are we almost at?
40.
Woo!
Ooh.
I can't believe that. That's so exciting.
Crazy. Yeah, it's crazy.
Is there anything else that you would like to end us with at the top 10 here of 2022?
Go to the movies. Please go to the movies. Go to the movies. And Turning Red people, I know where to find you.
I refuse to let this end on the Turning Red hate, so I will agree with you and say go to the movies. I think it's essential to keep the business alive, to keep us getting new movies and great films. So it's easy to commit to this. Go to one film in the theaters a month. That's not too expensive. It's one movie a month. And that alone, I think, will change your perspective on some of these films and some of these experiences. Thanks for joining us. I'm John.
And I'm Ben.
And this is Worthy.
Thanks for listening to Worthy, the breakdown of every Best Picture winner from past to present. You can listen to us wherever you get your podcasts. Check us out on Instagram at Worthy Podcast, on Twitter at Worthy Pod, and on Facebook at Worthy Podcast. Any inquiries can be submitted to worthysubmissions@gmail.com. Again, that's worthysubmissions@gmail.com.